Alright, what's up, Dragon Brood? Today we're going to try something different. We have Phyrexia All Will Be One rolling out soon, and people are going to be looking for deck lists. And generally, in previous seasons, I would put out a bunch of different videos of individual decks, and that was all fine and good. However, there is an actual difficult process to that I have to do a bunch of little decks and a bunch of short videos, and it's harder for everybody to watch, and the views aren't as good. A lot of problems. So what I'm going to try this season is we're going to do decks by groupings, color types, maybe strategies, so people can see different builds within their favorite types of decks or even their favorite colors. So in this one, we're going to do Gruul decks, 3 of them. So you're going to get to see 3 different Gruul decks with different strategies and builds, some of them that the cards carry over in case you want to try different things. But hey, let me know what you think about this. Let's get into it and talk about some Gruul decks. Right now, I am going to apologize because we don't have this in Arena, so we don't have our flashy, perfect stuff. But we are using Aether Hub because all the cards are in there, and I can at least lay them out and we can talk about them as we go through them. So that's the best we kind of have for the time being. If I come up with something better, maybe we'll do the next couple of videos a little bit differently. But I do still want to present you with something. These deck lists will all be available for download and will be linked as well, so you will be able to get those when the set goes live on Arena. So, starting with this list, this is going to be what we're going to call a Gruul Ramp Aggro. So, even though you're ramping, you're still playing it very much as an aggro deck. The goal in this deck is going to be to go from 2 mana to 4 mana, or 3 mana to 5 mana. So, it's basically what the whole deck is built around. So, we're playing a new card in Armored Scrap Gorger, which is a 2 mana 0/3. It gets +3/+0 if it has 3 or more oil counters on it. You can tap it for mana of any color, which is the main reason it's in here. But whenever you tap it, you can remove a card from a graveyard and then actually put a counter on it. So by removing 3 things, then you get to put 3 counters. Don't know how often this is going to be a 3/3. That's almost just kind of a bonus later in the game. However, being able to go again from 2 mana to 4 mana is why it's hanging out in here. We're playing for Lightning Strike because Lightning Strike's just a good card, and we do need some damage and removal. We've got 3 Loam Speaker. And Loam Speaker's been around for a while. This isn't a new card. Everybody knows what this is. However, again, it's helping out with that mana situation and can give us 3/3s later. We've got a full set of Fable of the Mirror Breaker because the card's silly. But again, it lets us go from 3 mana. We can attack, get the treasure, and now we have 5 mana to play one of our big 5 mana things if we want. Jewel Thief also kind of works toward that as well. We are on 3 mana. We make a treasure. We play our land. We now have 5 mana, right? So you kind of see where the whole first half of the deck is just setting up the back half. So no surprises there. Of the things we're going to try to cast with these 4 and 5 mana, we've got 3 Ulvenwald Oddities. What we like about this is 2 things. One, that it's a 4 mana thing. So again, the 2 to 4 situation that we're doing. But additionally, this card actually has haste. So it's great after a sweeper. And if we're already playing a bunch of mana, we're going to be able to transform this pretty regularly because we only have to get to 7 mana, and we're going to have several ways to do that. So 7 mana is nowhere near out of reach for this deck. It's actually fine because in a lot of cases, if we can get to 5, we can get to 7, and that's the biggest thing here. So we wanted something else to do with that mana. So we're playing the 3 Ulvenwald Oddities. We are going to try playing a full set of Luca Bound to Ruin. This is a new Planeswalker. Now, while it does cost 5, 2 colorless, red, green, and a Phyrexian mana, we actually can play this for 4 or 5, depending on where we're at and what our hand looks like. So if we have the mana, we can just go 2 to 4, go ahead and play Luca, make a 3/3. Like, that's totally reasonable. If not, then we just wait, play something else, be Ulvenwald Oddity or whatever. Then we play Luca on the next turn, or we could play Luca, then ramp up, so there's a lot of choices of ways we can use mana. Because Luca's first ability does let you add 2 mana to your mana pool, so that helps with our ramping situation to go really big on the top end. But also lets us make 3/3 blockers if we need to in a pinch, and that's more than reasonable in this build. So I actually like a lot of what this card does. Even when I saw this in preview season, I thought Luca might be one of the more played Planeswalkers for the red-green decks especially, but we'll see how it ends up. Could be completely wrong, but we're going to give it a go in here. So we have the 4 Lucas, and we have 2 Thrun Breaker of Silence. We're going to go ahead and play 2 Thrun because Thrun is actually really stupid good. I mean, he's a 5 mana 5/5. Can't be countered, so that's great. It has Trample, which is a bonus. Your opponent can't target it with anything that's not green, so that's great. And then on top of that, when it's your turn, it has Indestructible. So basically when you're getting to attack with it, your opponent can't kill it, which is awesome. So 5/5 Trampler, big body, and again, 5 mana, easy to get to. Which brings us to Nissa, Ascendant Animus, and that's actually the same kind of situation here. While it costs 7 mana, we can also get by just playing it for 5. And I will say it's a little less exciting if you play it for 5 because then her ability to make the token that's going to give you a blocker, it becomes a lot less exciting. So if you can play it for 6 or 7, you would like to do that to be able to make a bigger token blocker, which is great. If not, at least you get to destroy an artifact and enchantment, and that has some value too. And then the last thing we're trying to cast with all that mana is 3 Titan of Industry, which is not a surprise at all. This card's very good. And if we can get to 6 or 7 mana, then why not, right? Because again, if you get to Luca at 5, Luca produces 2 green. You can use that mana, or 2 mana, a red and a green, but you can use that mana to cast the Titan of Industry. So if we can get to Luca, we can often get to Titan. Or to Nissa on up the ladder or whatever, right? So it's really just those first couple of turns. If your opponent somehow magically deals with 3 ramp creatures or whatever, yeah, then it's going to be tough. But I like the idea of this deck. I like what it does. It plays the Planeswalkers, so you're going to be less susceptible to something like Farewell, for example, where it still leaves Planeswalkers behind. You get really big creatures that are hard to deal with. Like, honestly, outside of your mana creatures, every single thing in here is a significant threat. I mean, you're talking about Uvenwald Oddity being a problem, Luca being able to make a ton of bodies being a problem. You've got Nissa being able to make big bodies, Titan, Thrun. Like, this is just endless threats, which is very cool. Now, the downside is you do have multiple copies of things that are legendary, right? We're playing a full set of Luca, full set of Nissa, multiple Thrun. So, like, you can have times where maybe you may not have a lot to cast, but that's where Fable of the Mirror Breaker actually comes in and helps. So, yeah. Lands, we're not doing anything special other than you'll see 3 Thran Mishra's Foundry in the list because, again, we just need something to do with all that mana. And if we've already started casting our stuff, we already have mana creatures out. Having creature lands is very good. And, again, if your board gets swept or your opponent deals with all your creatures, you still have something to attack with. But otherwise, nothing real fancy land-wise. We're just playing all the multicolor lands that exist now since we have a red-green fast land, which helps us out as well. But yeah, this one I think is going to be a lot of fun trying to go big. But we do have another list that goes even bigger, so we'll talk about that in a second. Now, jumping into the second list here, I want to give some credit to Yeoman 5, because this one was mostly his. I think I only swapped like 2 cards here from what he was doing. And he basically did a lot of the early work here for me, so that saved me some time. But I do like the idea of this deck. This is what we're going to call a Gruul Oil Aggro. So if you want something that cares about oil counters, this is probably the way you can go that's going to be pretty good. So we're going to start with Evolving Adaptive. This card's actually pretty sweet. It's basically a 1 mana 1/1 because it comes into play with 1 oil counter on it. But every time you play a creature that's bigger than it, toughness or power, it gets another oil counter. And it has +1/+1 for each oil counter on it. So obviously you can keep playing creatures, keep making it bigger, which is awesome. You can have it be a 3/3/4/4 fairly easily. We're going to also play the Exuberant Fuseling, I should say. Colorless, it's colorless. No, it's not. It's a red mana. It's an 0/1. But it does come into play with a oil counter on it. So it's a 1/1. And then every time something dies, you get to put another oil counter on it. It does also have Trample, which is something to note because that can be pretty important in this list. Now, a card that we haven't really talked about much even in the preseason is Free from Flesh. And it's a 1 red instant. Give a creature 2/2 until end of turn, but you put 2 oil counters on it, which in this list is pretty big because that's like +4/+4 on either the, well, it's a +4/+4 on the Adaptive Automaton. It's a +4/+2 on the Fuseling, right? Because of the bonuses they get from having those extra oil counters. So you don't want to discount that. It's actually really, really big here. Then, just like we had in the last list, Armored Scrap Gorger is going to make an appearance here because, again, it adds oil counters if you remove stuff from graveyards. But it does just give us plenty of mana so we can cast bigger stuff if we need to. So nothing too upsetting about this card. It's not exciting because it doesn't really have attack power for a couple of turns. But I don't hate that just the same, just having the utility to remove stuff from a graveyard. Then we have Canker Bloom. This is one of the new ones. And I was debating on if this would make the cut, but Yeoman 5 had it in his, so I decided to just leave it. But it's a 2 mana 3/2. You can pay 1 and sacrifice it, and you choose either destroy an artifact, destroy an enchantment, or proliferate, which again, proliferate could be pretty good in here because if we get to put counters on everything, then that's going to make those creatures bigger, right? So we like that as well. The one thing I will say about this, this is a spot where maybe if you wanted to play Quirion Beastcaller or something of that nature to just get +1/+1s and just be able to move some counters around, could be a worthwhile option to consider, especially since we have other things with Trample. But Proliferate's really good when we're talking about all these oil counters, so just something to think about. Then we have 4 Lightning Strikes as well, so again, more damage. I almost called it the wrong thing here. So many new names I gotta remember. Bloated Contaminator. This thing is actually a 3 mana 4/4, and honestly, probably the best green aggressive card we've had in a long time. I mean, a 3 mana 4/4, it has Trample, Toxic 1. We're probably never going to kill somebody with Toxic damage. That's just kind of in here. But whenever it deals damage to a player, you proliferate, which is great because this has Trample. And again, you get to put extra oil counters on your other stuff. That's actually really, really good, right? So we get to make bigger creatures. So all these things kind of work in conjunction together. So you sort of see where this is going. Now, the new card we have is Miglo's Maze Crusher. It's a 3 mana 4/4. Comes in with a pile of oil counters on it, and then you can get different abilities. You can give it Vigilance and Menace. You can pay 2, and it gets +2/+2 till end of turn, or and remove 2. Or you can remove 3 and destroy target artifact or enchantment. So again, this gives you more options. You can just keep making this bigger, do more stuff with it if you get to keep adding oil counters, right? So now you have 2 sets of cards that also add oil counters. Well, technically, proliferates. And then you have another card that gives you the option to proliferate as well. So this is a lot of things going on here. Now, one of the cards, and this is where I switched some stuff that he didn't have. I'm playing 2 copies of Evolved Spinoderm here. It's a 4 mana 5/5, and it comes into play with 4 oil counters, and you remove 1 every turn. When it's down to 2 or less, it gains Trample, and then if you remove the oil counters and it has none, then it just dies. Now, the goal would be, hopefully, we either kill our opponent before we run out of oil counters, or we find ways to just keep adding stuff, proliferating, whatever, and it's just a nuisance for our opponent. But getting another Trample creature is actually pretty big here too, especially since we have a few things that could pump our creatures, so that's also pretty nice. And then we're playing 3 copies of Cinderlash Ravager. This is an uncommon, so it kind of slipped into the list here, but it is a 6 mana 5/5, which doesn't sound great, but it does cost 1 less for each permanent we have with an oil counter. So that's not nothing. You know, it does let you very often probably play this for 3. Wouldn't be unreasonable. I could see it happening quite a lot. And when it comes into play, it deals 1 damage to all your opponent's stuff. So randomly could be good against tokens and things. Or if you get in those situations where your opponent blocks a certain way with, say, like a veteran or something that's pumping their soldiers to where it would live, then you play this, it kills the veteran, and then oftentimes will pick off the other soldiers as well. So some cool stuff going on here. Land-wise, we're not doing anything too surprising. However, we are playing 3 copies of the Monumental Facade. And that's because it comes in with oil counters, which also benefits the Cinderlash Ravager, so we don't want to discount that. We can also move oil counters from this onto other permanents, which is also good because, again, that could be like pumping our creatures or keeping something like a Spinoderm alive, which is great. And then the Seed Core we're playing because it lets us have mana of any color to cast a Phyrexian creature. And wouldn't you know it, if everything in the deck's not a Phyrexian creature. So, yeah, why not? Now, I maybe could get away playing 4, because now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, the only thing we have that's not are our spells, but you also don't want to get caught not being able to cast those because they're kind of important. But I think for now, starting the list with 3 is probably going to be plenty for most people. Overall, though, I do like this deck. I think it's a very good use of oil counters, and I think it does a lot of what we would be trying to do with new cards and really getting to show off a feature of the new set. All right, so when we were talking about that first deck, I mentioned that we have an even bigger ramp deck that we can play, and that's kind of where we are with this one. Now, interestingly, I believe Yeoman 5 also had a version of this, and I think we ended up being like 4 or 5 cards off, but I think his had black and mine has red, something like that. So some different ways you could go about this. I decided to keep it in Gruul with the theme of this video, but there are choices that you could go with here. But we are going to go ahead and play, again, Armored Scrap Gorger. You're seeing that a lot so in this video so far. We are playing Loam Speaker, which we talked about earlier. This one, we are going ahead and playing a couple of copies of Taxidermist, because I kind of wanted to try to increase the odds, again, of going from 2 to 4. I think it's very important in this build. And just having more ramp creatures I don't think is bad, because some of them will die just to a myriad of things, and this is going to give us more options. Still playing a full set of 4 Fable of the Mirror Breaker in this one. This one, though, is going to pack in 2 copies of Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia. And what we're going to do with Gwenna here is get the mana to cast these really big creatures, because Gwenna gives us 2 mana of any color that we want, and if the creature is power 5 or greater, gets to untap. So we could end up with a sizable creature to block with or attack with even after playing one of our bigger monsters. So we're excited about that. Now, Gwenna will not be able to use the mana to cast the Planeswalkers, but I think that's totally okay. Even just being a 2/3 at times is going to be fine. Then we have 4 big score. Again, going from 2 to 4, being able to discard something, draw 2 cards, get those treasure. That sets you up to cast whatever you want on the next turn, which is pretty big. We're back to playing for Luca again, because again, we talked about making the beast, getting the mana, all that good stuff. Checks all those boxes. Same thing with Nissa. We're going a full set of 4, because again, if we can just cast it for full value, which we should be able to in this list a fair amount of the time, then you just start making big tokens, and that's amazing, right? We also have Titan of Industry, playing a full set of 4, because again, if we can get to 7 for that or Nissa, great. And honestly, even if we just have to discount Nissa, if we just have to play Nissa for 6, that's cool too, right? Not a problem. And then we just work our way up to Titans, and that'll work. But here we're going to play Tyrannix Rex. We're going to go for it and just say, hey, if we got 7 already, because we've been talking about it in the preseason, right? Do you play Titan or do you play Tyrannix Rex? Well, what if you just play both? I mean, I need that little meme girl that just says, like, why not both, right? Because this is kind of where we're at. Both, by the way, BOFF, both of them, apostrophe EM. They're both in there. So this is where we're going with this. I think this could be a lot of fun with just all the huge bodies. And honestly, this is the type of thing that if you get one of these out on turn 3, turn 4, something like that, like, your opponent's set behind pretty significantly. You know, if you start casting Titan or Tyrannix Rex turn 4, your opponent's going to be in rough shape. I mean, seriously. Like, you're talking about having to deal with an 8/8 that you can't even target, that can't be countered, that has haste, right? So they're going to be taking a lot of damage. On top of Titan being able to gain life, make another body, Luca being able to make bodies, Nissa being able to make bodies. So you just have to stick 2 of these threats, and you're probably going to be in pretty good shape a lot of the time. Now, not saying they can't kill stuff or whatever. We know there's other issues, but realistically, this has the ability to do some really big things. Like, now, to be fair, you're also going to have draws where you're going to draw too many mana creatures and not enough threats. Like, that's what happens when you play a ramp deck sometimes. You know that's the thing. However, what I do like about this list is we're playing creatures that can actually do more, right? The Recluse can, Taxidermist can eventually become a 4/4. The Loam Speaker can make 3/3s or turn your lands into 3/3s. You know, the Scrap Gorger can become a 3/3. So you do still have other options to keep getting blocks and attacks in, regardless of if you miss sometimes, which I do like. So some cool stuff going on with this list and making use of several of the new cards, which is really nice. Land-wise, we're not doing anything particularly special here except for playing a full set of Mishra's Foundry. Because again, if we already have all that mana, we might as well be doing something with it, give us an opportunity to get more attacks in, and protect ourselves from removal, sweepers, whatever, a little bit more. So I like all the stuff going on here. Again, the one thing I will say about this list is that we're going heavy on the mana, going for the big creatures, but we do not have any removal in this list. This is all about just stacking biggin after biggin after biggin, right? Just keeping the pressure on your opponent, keeping them on the back foot, and just keep finding more things. So the key cards in here, believe it or not, though you think it is the mana creatures, are actually Big Score and Fable of the Mirror Breaker, because those are going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting to make sure we can keep finding the big things to cast. But otherwise, yeah, this should actually be a pretty sweet list to play too. Well, there you have it. There's 3 decks for Gruul for the new set. Now, and let me know, do you like this type of format or not? Are these the type of videos you're looking for head starts? Do you have any ideas on the decks that we played? Did I overlook any cards that you would consider playing? I think there's a lot to talk about here. But keep an eye out. We're going to have some more of these coming before we get to the release of the set, just so you have some more things to look forward to. That's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.